Did you hear that right? A rusty toolbox? Roland's voice boomed through the lawyer's office, followed by a chorus of laughter from the cousins. Cynthia smirked so wide her red lipstick nearly cracked. Figures. Some people are born for scraps, she said, sliding the deed to her trust fund across the polished oak table like she'd just won the lottery. My name still echoed in my ears, those bitter words from the will. To my nephew, James, I leave one old metal toolbox, contents unknown. The lawyer had read it without a pause, already moving on to the glittering fortunes my relatives expected. Roland walked out clutching keys to a lakeside mansion. Cynthia twirled her paperwork like a prize ribbon, and I carried a dented, rust-stained box that rattled when I shifted it in my hands. Their laughter followed me out of the room like a bad smell. Look at him, proud of junk, Roland jeered from the steps. I wanted to turn, to spit out every word I'd swallowed for years, but instead I gripped the handle tighter. My palms ached, and with every step to the parking lot I felt myself shrink in their eyes. By the time I pulled up to our little house on Maple Street, the shame weighed heavier than the box itself. My mother, Evelyn, was waiting in her rocking chair by the window, her fragile frame wrapped in the quilt she'd stitched decades ago. She looked up as I came in, and her eyes, always soft, searched my face before settling on the object in my hands. What did your uncle leave you, James? She asked gently. I dropped the toolbox onto the kitchen table with a hollow clang. Just this. Her gaze didn't flinch at the rust or the dents. She leaned forward, her hands folded like she was holding something sacred. Do not be ashamed. Sometimes the smallest things carry the greatest worth. I wanted to believe her, but the sting of that lawyer's office still burned. I had spent my life working long hours at the mill, patching leaks in this house, making sure Mom never went without her medicine, never letting the world see how close to the edge we really lived. All I'd hoped for was a sign that Uncle Thomas had seen me, not as the poor nephew with calloused hands, but as a man who had done right by his family. Instead, he left me a box that looked ready for the scrapyard. But later that night, as I turned the latch and felt the unusual weight shift inside, I realized this story wasn't about the mansions or the millions my cousins flaunted. It was about what waited for me, hidden beneath layers of rust and ridicule, and once I discovered it, nothing in my life or theirs would ever be the same. To understand the sting that burned in me that day, you'd have to know who my Uncle Thomas really was. To the people in our town, he wasn't just wealthy, he was untouchable. He built his fortune in shipping and real estate, buying land others thought worthless and turning it into gold. He was the man who never drove the same car twice, whose shoes shined brighter than the marble floors in the courthouse, whose presence filled a room without a single word. At family gatherings, he didn't brag, but the quiet way he carried himself reminded everyone of the distance between his world and ours. When I was 10, I still thought he hung the moon. I remember standing on the lawn at a family reunion, waiting with wide eyes as he passed out gifts. Roland grinned ear to ear when he was handed a leather baseball glove. Cynthia squealed when she wheeled away on a brand new bicycle, ribbons fluttering on the handlebars. I waited for my turn, my heart pounding, hoping for something, even a toy car. Uncle Thomas turned to me, his hand heavy on my shoulder. One day, James, he said, you'll understand that not all treasures shine. Then he moved on. No gift, no explanation. At the time, I thought he had simply forgotten me. As I grew older, I tried to believe he meant something more. But when I sat in that lawyer's office years later and heard my name tied to nothing more than an old metal toolbox, I felt like that same forgotten boy. Roland and Cynthia carried themselves like they had been born to inherit kingdoms. Roland swaggered into every holiday dinner with stories of new business ventures, most of which collapsed within months, but his arrogance never did. He had a way of laughing at me that made me feel like less than dirt. Cynthia was sharper, her words slicing deep without effort. She looked at my life at the mill as proof of weakness, not of the sacrifice it took to keep food on the table and medicine on the counter. To them, I was a man who had already failed, The toolbox, dented and rusted, was only confirmation of what they believed. I carried that humiliation back to our house on Maple Street. Every wall whispered of struggle. The linoleum floor had peeled so thin you could see the boards beneath. The wallpaper in the hallway curled like old bark. My mother's pill bottles lined the counter like soldiers, each one a reminder of bills that seemed to grow faster than I could pay them. There was no mansion, no trust fund, no shiny car parked outside. There was only my pride, my long hours at the mill, and the promise I'd made to care for my mother no matter how heavy the burden became. The toolbox sat in the middle of our kitchen table, like a curse I couldn't look at for too long. I tried to ignore it, cooking beans and cornbread for dinner, the same meal we'd eaten so many nights before. My mother, Evelyn, sat by the lamp sewing a loose button back on my shirt, her hands steady despite their frailty. She never complained, not about the peeling walls or the empty bank account. She had seen both wealth and ruin in her life, and she always told me that a man's worth wasn't measured by what he owned, but by how he carried himself when he had nothing. That night, sitting across from her, I realized why my chest hurt so badly. It wasn't just the laughter of Roland and Cynthia, or the cruel weight of humiliation. It was the fear that maybe Uncle Thomas had never really seen me, that he'd looked at me the same way they did. Small, unworthy, a man destined to live off scraps. I tried to swallow it down, but Evelyn's words pressed against the silence. The smallest gifts, she said, sometimes carry the greatest meaning. I didn't understand it, not then. But I knew she believed it. That faith was enough to stop me from throwing the toolbox into the shed and locking the door behind it. I kept staring at it, running my fingers over the jagged metal, wondering why it felt so much heavier than it should have. Days passed and still it sat there watching me. The weight of it wasn't just iron and rust, it was something else, something I couldn't yet name. Every time I walked past it, a knot formed in my chest. Part of me was convinced it was a final insult. One last reminder that I was nothing but the poor nephew, the one with calloused hands and no future. And yet something about that box unsettled me. The weight wasn't only physical. It pressed on my mind, gnawed at my pride, and whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was more waiting for me inside than anyone, even I, could imagine. On the third night after the will was read, there came a knock at my door. When I opened it, Roland leaned lazily against the frame like he was stopping by to check on his property. His silk shirt gleamed under the porch light, his cologne thick in the air. "Well, cousin," he said with that smug grin, "how's that treasure box treating you? Found any diamonds between the rust yet?" I tightened my jaw. "It's just a toolbox, Roland," he smirked, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a mocking whisper. "That's all you'll ever get, James, junk for a junk man. Cynthia nearly spit her wine out last night imagining you polishing those rusty bolts like they were worth a fortune." From the living room, Evelyn's voice rang out, sharp and steady. "Roland, that's enough." She didn't raise her voice often, but when she did, it had a way of cutting through the air. Roland just shrugged, tossed me a careless wave, and sauntered down the steps. His laughter trailed behind him as he slid into his car and peeled off into the night. I sank into the chair by the table, staring at the box. His words burned, not because they were true, but because I had nothing to prove them false. I flipped open the lid again, hoping, praying for something more. All I saw were worn-out tools. A hammer with a cracked handle, wrenches dulled from years of use, a tape measure that barely held together. No treasure, no meaning, just the kind of scraps Roland swore I deserved. But when I lifted it, the weight told a different story. Heavier than it should have been. I traced my hand across the bottom and felt something shift, a faint rattle, muffled and strange. My pulse quickened even as I told myself not to get carried away. Still, I carried the box into my bedroom, set it on the floor, and tapped the underside with my knuckles. The sound was too solid, not hollow at all, like something was hidden beneath. I grabbed a screwdriver from the drawer, wedging it against the edge of the bottom panel. It resisted at first, screeching as I forced it deeper, but finally the metal began to lift. Sweat slid down my temples as I pried it open. My breath shallow, my hands shaking. When the panel gave way, I found a hidden compartment no one would have noticed unless they'd gone looking. Inside was no gold, no cash, no keys to some mansion. Just an old flip phone, dusty, scratched, its antenna bent. I frowned, confused. Why would my uncle hide something so ordinary? I pressed the power button, half expecting nothing. To my shock, the screen glowed faintly to life. And before I could even think, it rang. The shrill sound filled the room, freezing me in place. The word incoming flashed on the display. Evelyn stood in the doorway now, her eyes wide. "Answer it," she whispered. My hands trembled as I pressed the green button and raised it to my ear. "James," a deep voice said, steady and deliberate. "If you are hearing this, it means Thomas trusted you. The real inheritance begins now." My throat tightened. I forced out the words. "Who is this?" "You will know soon enough," the voice replied. "Follow the instructions. Do not share this with anyone. The others would not understand. This is between you and the man who knew your worth." The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my pulse hammering, my ears ringing with silence. Evelyn stepped forward, her hand soft on my shoulder. "What did they say, James?" "They said, the real inheritance begins now." Her eyes glistened, holding both pride and worry. "Your uncle never did anything without reason. If he chose you, there's a purpose in it." I sat there on the edge of my bed, the phone still warm in my hand, my thoughts racing. Roland's mockery, Cynthia's laughter. They already felt like echoes. For the first time since the reading, the shame loosened its grip on me. In its place was something fierce, a spark of possibility I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't a joke. This was a beginning. Uncle Thomas had left me more than rust. He had left me a secret, and with it the promise of something far greater than Roland or Cynthia could ever imagine. He had left me not just a secret, but maybe a burden. That realization sank deep, heavier than the toolbox itself. For the first time in my life, I carried something Roland and Cynthia couldn't laugh away. And that made it dangerous. If they ever found out, Roland's greed would drive him straight through my front door, and Cynthia's sharp tongue would turn to knives. Whatever this inheritance was, it wasn't safe to flaunt. That night, I barely closed my eyes. The phone sat on the nightstand beside me, glowing faintly each time I checked it, silent yet alive. "The real inheritance begins now." The words repeated in my head until they felt burned into my bones. Was this the start of a gift or the edge of a trap? I didn't know. What I did know was that my life had already shifted. By morning, Evelyn found me slumped at the kitchen table, shadows under my eyes, the coffee pot working harder than I was. She set a cup in front of me, her hands as steady as they'd been all my life. "You have to decide, James," she said softly. "You can set that thing aside and live as you always have, or you can see where it leads. But Thomas never did anything without meaning. If he hid that phone, then it's no prank." Her words sank into me like anchors. She was right. Roland's laughter still clawed at my pride, but now I had something he didn't. Something Thomas had left for me. I didn't understand why, but I knew one thing. I couldn't turn my back on it. That evening, when the phone rang again, I nearly dropped it. The same deep voice came through, calm and deliberate. "James, listen closely. There is a storage facility at the edge of town. Unit 17. The code is your father's birthday. Go tonight. Tell no one." The line cut before I could ask a single question. I sat frozen, the phone still warm in my hand. Whoever this was knew things only family would know. My father's birthday wasn't on any paper trail, it was something remembered, not written. I told Evelyn what I'd heard, and her face turned solemn. "If your uncle trusted you, then it's for a reason. Go careful. Take the truck. Don't let Roland or Cynthia catch wind of it." The thought of them sniffing around made my stomach turn. If they guessed I held more than a rusty box, they'd circle me like vultures. I decided I wouldn't give them the chance. By 9 that night, I was behind the wheel of my old pickup, toolbox locked in the back, phone tucked safe in my pocket. The highway stretched out quiet and empty, the kind of silence that sharpens every sound. My headlights cut across barren fields and shuttered shops, each mile drawing me deeper into a part of my life I hadn't asked for, but couldn't walk away from. When I reached the storage facility, its chain-link fence loomed tall in the dark, topped with barbed wire that glinted under a single buzzing floodlight. I killed the engine, the silence roaring in my ears. The phone buzzed in my pocket before I even touched the gate. The gate code, the voice said, calm as ever, is the year you graduated high school. Use it, then go straight to 17. I punched the numbers into the keypad, my fingers trembling. The lock beeped and the gate rolled back with a groan that echoed too loud in the still night. Gravel crunched under my tires as I eased the truck forward, rows of identical steel doors stretching into the dark on either side. Unit 17 waited halfway down, its number stenciled in black. I parked, stepped out, and walked toward it. The keypad glowed faint red. I entered my father's birthday, the digits feeling heavy as if each carried more than memory. The light blinked green and the latch clicked open. With both hands I pulled the door upward. The metal rolled back with a hollow clatter that echoed down the row, rattling against the silence. Inside, the air smelled of oil and dust, thick with the weight of something hidden. At first glance it looked ordinary. Shelves stacked with boxes, a tarp draped over something large. But the space felt deliberate, as though everything inside had been placed with purpose. The phone buzzed again in my pocket. I answered quickly, my breath sharp in my throat. "You're where you're meant to be," the voice said, steady and deliberate. "Pull back the tarp, then read the letter waiting on the desk." The sound of my boots scraping against the concrete echoed as I stepped further into the unit. The tarp loomed in front of me, hiding something heavy and deliberate. With a breath that seemed to stick in my chest, I yanked it away. What stood revealed were 3 thick metal crates stacked with precision. Stenciled across each one were bold words that froze me in place. Property of T. Halloway, Uncle Thomas. Beside the crates sat a desk scarred by age but still strong, as though it had been chosen for endurance rather than appearance. On its surface rested a single envelope, my name written in bold strokes, James. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Uncle Thomas's handwriting stared back at me, steady and unwavering. "James, if you are reading this, then you have already proven what I hoped. The estates and money I left to Roland and Cynthia will rot in their hands. They craved wealth and appearances, and I gave them exactly that. It will undo them, and I feel no sorrow in it. But you, I trust you with what truly matters. These crates hold not just money, but records, evidence, and directions that only you can carry forward. I chose you because you live quietly, because you know what loyalty means, because you have not been blinded by greed. Protect this. Build with it. This is your true inheritance." The paper slipped in my shaking hands. I sat hard on the wooden chair, the weight of his words heavier than any estate or mansion my cousins could boast about. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't mocked me. He had chosen me. The shame I had carried from Roland's sneers and Cynthia's cold laughter began to crumble. In its place rose something unfamiliar, something stronger. Responsibility. I stared again at the crates, their steel sides gleaming in the low light. While Roland and Cynthia celebrated with lawyers and champagne, bragging over titles and land, the real legacy, the one worth more than any bank balance, was sitting in this dusty storage unit with my name stitched to it. For the first time in years, a fire burned in me. Not anger, not envy, pride. The phone felt alive in my hand as I lifted it. "I read the letter," I whispered. "Then you understand," the voice replied, calm as ever. "This is only the beginning." The call cut, leaving me alone with silence that rang louder than words. I stood, letter clutched tight, legs weak beneath me. For years I'd been painted as the forgotten nephew, the afterthought, the man meant to live in the shadow of arrogance. Yet here was proof that my uncle had seen me clearer than anyone ever had. Carefully I laid the letter back on the desk. My eyes shifted to the crates. Each one was sealed with a padlock, the initials TH etched into the steel. Grabbing a crowbar resting against the wall, I wedged it under the first lock. With one sharp crack it snapped. I pried the lid open and froze. Inside, neatly stacked, were rows of gold bars. They caught even the dull light, glowing like something alive. My knees nearly gave out. The second crate broke open to reveal thick bundles of cash wrapped tight, their edges clean, untouched by years. The third was different. Inside were journals bound in leather, maps rolled carefully and tied with twine, and a ring of heavy keys. I lifted one journal, flipping through pages filled with Uncle Thomas's deliberate handwriting. Records of investments, properties, hidden accounts scattered across states. This wasn't just wealth. It was a blueprint for an empire. The phone buzzed again. My pulse jumped as I answered. "I opened them," I said, my voice shaking. "Gold, cash, journals, what is this?" "This," the voice replied, steady but almost proud, "is your uncle's true legacy. Not the showpieces he handed to Roland and Cynthia, but the foundation of everything he built. He trusted you to carry it forward because he believed you had the heart to protect it, not waste it." I swallowed hard, clutching the journal tighter. But why me? He barely spoke to me. The voice did not hesitate. "Because he watched you, James. When others overlooked you, he paid attention. He knew." The voice continued, steady and certain. "He knew you stayed by your mother's side when no one else bothered. He knew you worked with your hands, earned your life through sweat instead of shortcuts. He knew you would not betray him. That's why he chose you, James, not Roland, not Cynthia." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked down at the gold bars, the cash stacked tight, the journals filled with my uncle's own handwriting. The weight of it pressed against my chest. My cousins' mocking laughter echoed in my head, but now it no longer cut me open. They thought they had won. They believed the estates and the cars were the crown jewels. They had no idea the true inheritance was here waiting for me. Suddenly, light swept across the rows of storage units. Headlights. My stomach dropped. I ducked behind the crates, pulse hammering so loud I swore it could be heard outside. Through the slats of the door, I spotted Roland's black car rolling slowly into the facility. The hood caught the overhead lamps with a sharp gleam. The door creaked open and Roland stepped out, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was harsh, carrying in the night air. "Yeah, the loser's truck is here. He's hiding something," my fists clenched. "He must have followed me. He was seconds away from discovering everything." I pulled the phone from my pocket and whispered, "Roland's here." "What do I do?" The voice replied without a pause. "Close it, lock it. Leave now. Protect what's inside. Do not let him see it." I slammed the lids of the crates shut, pulled the tarp over them, and dragged the unit door down with a crash. My fingers shook as I punched the code into the keypad, locking it again. Roland's footsteps echoed, his tone sharp with impatience. "James!" he barked. "I know you're in there. Open up. Show me what you've got." My chest burned, but I forced myself to walk calmly toward my truck. Every part of me screamed to run, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "It's just junk, Roland," I said, steadying my voice. "You came all this way for nothing." His eyes narrowed, suspicion twisting his face. "You're lying." For the first time, I didn't flinch. I met his stare, something in me shifting, hardening. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. "Uncle Thomas left me what I needed," I said, my voice low but firm. "That's all you need to know." Roland's fists tightened, his face dark with anger, but I pulled out of the lot, leaving him behind in the glare of the security lights. My grip on the steering wheel was iron, my breath ragged, but inside me something had settled. I had guarded the secret for now. When I got home, the house lights glowed soft and steady. My mother, Evelyn, was waiting at the window, her silhouette framed against the curtains. She didn't ask questions when I stepped inside, only studied my face. "You found it, didn't you?" she asked quietly. I nodded, the weight of it all pressing harder than ever. She placed her hand gently over mine, her touch warm and steady. "Then you must carry it wisely. That's what your uncle wanted." In that moment I understood. The real turning point wasn't discovering gold or maps or hidden fortunes. It was realizing that Uncle Thomas had believed in me when no one else did. The old toolbox had been a doorway, The false bottom a key. The phone a guide. My inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was trust. Responsibility. A chance to prove that the man everyone underestimated was the one chosen to matter most. That night, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table with my uncle's letter spread before me, the words blurring as I read them again and again. He hadn't mocked me. He hadn't abandoned me. He had entrusted me with something greater than I'd ever imagined. By morning, the exhaustion clung to me, but something inside me had changed. Evelyn watched me closely as she sipped her tea. "Your father always believed you were made for more than this small life," she said softly. I think Thomas believed the same. I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. He left me something real, Ma. Not what Roland and Cynthia think they wanted. Something worth more. Something I have to protect. Her hand closed firmly over mine. "Then protect it," she said. "And use it for good. That is the only way wealth ever matters." My mother's words stayed with me, guiding me through the days that followed. I went back to the storage unit, unlocking each crate carefully, making a record of everything inside. The gold was staggering, the stacks of cash enough to erase every debt and still leave a mountain behind. Yet it wasn't the money that gripped me most, it was the journals. Inside those worn leather covers was my uncle's voice speaking to me across years. He wrote about persistence, discipline, and the cost of every choice he'd made. He recorded betrayals, victories, and the people he had trusted who later turned on him. He confessed his regrets, especially how greed had poisoned too much of our family and driven him to keep his distance. The more I read, the clearer it became. Uncle Thomas hadn't just left me an inheritance. He had left me a mission. He wanted someone who would not be consumed by wealth. Meanwhile, Roland and Cynthia began to notice something had shifted. I no longer carried myself like the man they mocked. Roland showed up one afternoon, his smirk thin, his tone heavy with suspicion. "You've been quiet, cousin. Too quiet. What are you hiding?" I held his stare, calm in a way that unsettled even me. "I'm not hiding anything, Roland. I'm just living," his sneer faltered. For years he had fed on my weakness, and now that it was gone, he didn't know where to bite. Cynthia called days later, her laughter sharp and bitter. "Don't tell me you actually think Thomas left you anything that mattered. He pitied you. That's all." I let her words slide past me. "Believe what you want, Cynthia. I know the truth." For the first time in my life, their venom didn't pierce me. It only confirmed what I already knew. Their inheritance had poisoned them. Mine had freed me. I began to put Thomas's gift to use. The money cleared my mother's medical bills and gave her the comfort she deserved after years of struggle. Quietly, I donated to the church that had kept its doors open for the hungry and the broken. I helped repair the community center where kids found safety after school, the same place that had once kept me out of trouble. Each act reminded me that money only has worth when it serves a greater good. The gold and cash were tools. The journals were a compass. Together they gave me something far greater than luxury: purpose. Roland and Cynthia flaunted their new estates, their shiny cars, their fine clothes. Yet their eyes never left me. They watched, restless and suspicious, because deep down they sensed I had gained something they couldn't touch. I pitied them, because all their wealth had only deepened their hunger. One evening, Roland cornered me in town, his face flushed with anger. "Tell me the truth," he demanded. "What did Thomas really leave you?" I met his eyes and answered steadily. "He left me something you'll never understand. Trust." For once, Roland had no words. He turned on his heel, muttering, but I knew the truth had struck him deeper than he wanted to admit. Months passed, and with them I changed. I was no longer the nephew mocked for a rusty old box. I was no longer the man living in the shadow of greedy cousins. I was a man carrying the weight of a legacy, one rooted not in greed but in responsibility. The toolbox still sits in my home. I keep it close, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as the moment my life shifted. It stands as proof that the plainest gifts can hold the deepest meaning. And when I share this story, It's not to boast about hidden gold or fortune. It's to remind anyone who hears it. Don't let the laughter of others convince you you're worthless. Don't dismiss small beginnings or gifts that look ordinary. Real inheritance is never measured in property lines, luxury cars, or bank accounts. It's measured in trust and responsibility, and in what you choose to do when your chance finally comes. Uncle Thomas gave me more than wealth. He gave me the chance to prove who I truly was. And that, more than gold, has changed everything. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you stop and think about what really matters in life, then I'd love for you to be part of this journey. Hit that like button to let me know it reached you, and share it with a friend or family member who might need the reminder that true value isn't found in flashy things, but in trust, love, and purpose. Drop a comment below and tell me what part spoke to you the most. I read every single one, and your words mean more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like James's, stories that uncover lessons about family, faith, and the kind of inheritance that goes beyond money, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every bit of support helps keep these stories alive, and together we can spread them further than either of us could alone.